Okay. All right, so I think let's get started. We'll see if colleagues join us along the way. Can you guys see clearly? That's better, right? Yeah. Okay, super. So, management of current liabilities. This feels like it should have been a part of your learning unit 5, but I guess maybe they just didn't want to make it too congested. Because yeah, it is a lot of theory, especially when you look at the textbook. But yeah, again, we are focused on our working capital. Okay, but now we're just obviously focusing on the current liability side. Okay, so here they define current liabilities and they say current liabilities are obligations that may arise in the ordinary course of business. Okay, current liabilities are a major source of short-term finance for a company. Okay, the short-term financing requirements usually fluctuate with the level of activity of the company. Okay, uh, the more active we find ourselves, the more financing we would obviously need, and subsequently, the more we might choose to use short-term loans or external financing as a result. So here it says a company experiencing high sales volumes will experience a rise in purchases from suppliers to meet the customer demand. Okay, this will increase accounts payable. Okay, because obviously, as demand is increasing, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have been selling for cash, which means we might not have cash available to us to go and buy more inventory. And so we end up saying, uh, whichever supplier we operate with, can we please take out inventory on credit or whatever goods necessary on credit? Then you have a rise in accruals, okay? Accruals owing to a rise in labor activity and increased taxes associated to higher profits. And we will break down accruals, but from your accounting 1B, you should be well aware of what accruals are. It's just basically, in this context, we're talking about expenses that are owed, which we know then become current liabilities, which is exactly what we are talking about today, current liabilities. And then arise in other sources of short-term financing, okay, which are not sources of spontaneous financing. Should the company experience a temporary shortfall in cash flows? And we'll unpack those sources of short-term financing, okay? Some of which are pretty much just delayed payment, okay? That also forms a form of financing, short-term financing that is not spontaneous. So here it says spontaneous financing refers to financing that arises and is received by a company as a direct result of variations in the level of activity through the ordinary course of business. Spontaneous financing does not require additional assistance from creditors or lenders and can be readily accessible by the company. Spontaneous financing includes accounts payables and accruals. Okay, and accruals. So, what are accounts payable? Okay, so here we're talking about trade credit, okay, occurs from credit purchases of goods and services from suppliers, okay, is a major source of unsecured short-term finance for most companies, okay. It is a major source, and I am sure there's no need to really unpack that, obviously, because this is the purchase of the stuff that you actually sell on credit. Okay, so it only makes sense that it is a major source of unsecured short-term finance. And then accounts payables represent the short-term interest-free loan and do not attract any direct costs. Hmm.
Track any direct costs. Doesn't it have interest like we pay off like
Yeah, a certain period, and yeah, so that's why I was actually going, because I definitely would not say in all cases it's interest free. I definitely would not. And especially if we agree terms to say, I'll pay you over 6 months or I'll pay you over 12 months, I imagine that there should be some level of interest on that. Because then what's their reward for waiting so long? You know? So if you're talking 30 to 60 days, yes, I can see maybe there might not be interest on that. But beyond that, I think you would definitely charge interest. So now they're talking about accounts payable management. Okay, so it obviously concerns with the managing of your current liabilities. Okay, a company's relationship with suppliers needs to be carefully managed. Okay, this is nothing new. It's more of a recap. Obviously, we want to extend the time it takes us to pay our creditors as long as possible, but without straining the relationship. Okay, or earning a bad reputation with our creditors. Okay. Then accounts payable management and the cash conversion cycle. This concerns managing accounts payable payment period. And here's where they're highlighting the aim is to delay payment period within given credit period until cash is collected to settle accounts payable. So when we say cash is collected, who are we collecting the cash from? From our debtors, okay? We are trying not, by all means, not to uh, take money out of our own pockets, if that makes sense, okay? Right. And then credit terms, okay? This obviously refers to what we have agreed in principle in terms of how long we are going to take to pay our creditor. All right, such terms include credit period, discount period, and discount amounts. Okay, so all of this is agreed upfront. Okay, so when we do come and pay our liability, we know exactly how much of a discount we should receive, and the how's it, and also the creditor is not confused about how much of a discount he is providing to us. Now, two sources of credit. You've got free trade credit, okay, and then you've got costly trade credit. Now, free trade credit occurs when the company pays account payable within discounted period, okay? So in other words, we're taking advantage of a settlement discount, okay? Then qualifies the business for a cash discount, early settlement discount, okay? Has no additional cost associated with trade payables. Okay. So here's now where it's interest free. Yeah. Okay. And then costly trade credit occurs when the business forgoes the cash discount by settling the outstanding payment on the last day of the credit period. The cost of giving up the cash discount arises from delaying the payment for the additional days. For the additional days. So they'll say, for instance, if you pay within 45 days, you can pay 9,000 instead of 12,000, for instance, right? And then obviously, if you pay on the very last day, the last 60th day, then you must pay the full 12,000. Yeah. Okay. Right. The opportunity cost of foregoing the supplier early settlement discount. And these are the calculations that you will find primarily in this learning unit. It's calculating whether we should take the discount, all right, or whether we should look at an alternative source of finance, depending on the interest rate, all right, or the opportunity cost of foregoing the discount, all right. And so here they say involves giving up the cash discount offered by a supplier by failing to make early settlement within the discount period. Okay, such opportunity cost represents the indirect and implied cost of accounts payable on foregone cash discount. So we have to calculate this as financial managers and say, is it more prudent for us to either take this discount, or actually we can get cheaper financing? We might as well borrow from FNB or ABSA to settle the difference, okay? And we do that by way of interest rate, analyzing which interest rate is higher, which interest rate is lower. The one that is lower is the option that we would then typically choose, right? So here it says, oh, here, well, it doesn't say anything. It shows us the formula for calculating the cost of giving up a cash discount. This is going to be your French, okay? And N stands for the number of extra days. So we're saying if they gave us a period of 60 days, but in 45 days, we can get a early settlement discount. So if we pay within 45 days, we get the early settlement discount. Any day after that, we are paying the full price. So you see, if we go beyond the 45 days, you might as well go all the way until day 60, because you've already lost the early settlement discount. So can you see why we are not discussing paying on day 50? It's either we're paying on day 45 or earlier, or we're paying on day 60. Okay, right. So, but also if we were to pay earlier than day 45, we got to ask ourselves, why are we paying earlier than day 45? Because we could be using that money to make more money or invest in something, right, in our inventory, etc. So you got to ask yourself, what is the real benefit of paying earlier than day 45? Okay, just making sure my phone was on silent. Okay, so this is the formula and the value of that formula. So I've already spoken quite a bit to the decision making using the cost of giving up the cash discount. Okay. So the financial manager must consider the costs associated with other sources of short-term finance. Yeah, it's actually been great going through this content, because some of these things, if you're not using them practically in your day-to-day work, you will forget them. So revisiting this stuff has been quite a lot of fun. Okay. Decision making on stretching accounts payable. This is pretty much what I've been talking about. So this involves delaying payment on outstanding amounts to suppliers, to supplier accounts, for as long as possible. Delaying outstanding payment should not damage the company's credit rating. Okay. So in other words, we should still pay within the agreed period, even if we're stretching. The greater the stretch, the lower the cost of giving up the cash discount will be. Okay. This is why we wait until day 60 and not day 55, because then we wouldn't have fully stretched to the ultimate limit that we can stretch for. Accruals refer to current liabilities for operational expenses. Very important. Operational expenses. So such operational expenses do not relate to the purchase of inventories. Accruals are estimated based on past experience. Accruals include liabilities for salaries and wages, utilities, rent, rates. So can you see? Basically, what's happening is we haven't paid our rent, okay? So obviously that money we would have paid towards rent is a source of funding. Can you see that? Because then we can plug it into our inventory or whatever else we want to further our business activities. Of course, you must be careful, because if you're not paying your landlord, we all know you can wake up one morning, go to work, and you realize the keys have changed, or your stuff is outside, right? You've been evicted, basically, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, this needs to be done very carefully, as well as I would suggest that you actually communicate with your landlord if you're going to do that, or any of these guys. Salaries and wages, uh, ish. playing around with salaries and wages is probably a very bad idea because it will definitely mess with employee morale. So I guess for me, the only context that I would entertain that is if we're saying, do you want to pay salaries on the 20th, on the 25th, or on the 30th, or the very last day of the month, that type of story. Yeah. Unsecured source of short-term financing. Interest rates on loans, okay? So yeah, I'm not even going to go into this. They're basically telling us about prime, and we've been hearing about prime since last year, since second year. All right. And then we have fixed interest loans, okay, which obviously means you're paying the same interest rate from the beginning to the end, regardless of how long this loan is. Also, all the way until maturity, the interest rate does not change. And obviously, a floating interest rate, here the interest rate can change, it can vary. Then here they also show us a formula we are quite familiar with, and that is to calculate the effective annual rate, the effective interest rate. Okay, we know that when we go to the bank, they will quote us the nominal rate. Say, you can afford it, it's just 10%. What you don't know, that might be 10% daily, or 10% monthly, or 10% weekly. Okay. And obviously, the more it's compounding, the higher the actual effective interest rate. Right. So we astute financial managers, internal auditors, and the like, we will obviously not be bamboozled by this. Okay. So now bank overdrafts. Okay. Bank overdrafts obviously help the business to withdraw available funds. I would say above available funds up to a given credit ceiling. Okay. So in other words, withdraw beyond the available funds that we actually have sitting in the bank account. Okay. Obviously to a agreed credit limit. Interest is incurred once the facility is used. Only when you utilize the overdraft will they start charging you on the amount that you have actually taken. And then you have revolving credit agreements. Okay. So here they basically guarantee you a line. And if you're in the industry of selling products and stuff, guaranteed lines of credit are quite useful. Okay. So they're extended by your bank. They are pretty much like like a overdraft facility, you could say. It's only that now it's like you go and you say, okay, I want so much, for these purposes and stuff like that. Enables as entities access to funds contractually available under the facility. The interest rate charged is floating or flexible. So in other words, it varies over the time that you've utilized these funds. The company pays the interest when it draws down funds. So there's no interest applicable when you are not making use of it. But however, like a credit card, they will charge you a monthly fee for just having access to that facility. Okay. Then accounts receivable financing. Okay. So here, comprises of two methods. You've got your pledging accounts receivable as collateral for a loan, okay? And then you've got the factoring, right? So I totally forgot about this pledging accounts receivable. So here it's like you are actually taking out a regular loan. You are just using your debtors as collateral to say, should I fail to pay you, you can come after my debtors and collect whatever the debtors owe to the business. That is what we mean by pledging accounts receivables. Okay. You are still going to be collecting whatever is due from your debtors. All right. Assuming assuming that you obviously haven't defaulted. Okay. So everything. Sorry. Yeah. They could, I've never heard of them actually doing that, but I assume that they do. Because I'm sure when they go to IMF or wherever else, because I mean, they have to show that we can actually pay back the money over whatever period. So I imagine that that's probably what they do. Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of that or come across that, but yeah. So yeah,
And also, before you touched on approvals, why would a company have approvals? Because it's just the nature of our operational expenses. Why would a company need to have approvals?
so two things. Usually, I imagine when things are tight and things are not going so well. So then, sometimes people will even tell their employees, guys, this month we're struggling. So we think we're only going to be able to pay 70% of your salary. So they try and tell you upfront so that you at least you're aware. You don't get shocked when your money comes in and it's not what you usually get. So that's the first reason. Things are tight. Secondly, an opportunity might arise that we can make a profit off of, right? Let's say we're in the mining industry, for instance, and we know platinum is going to go down. So like, hey, we should, because it's not like it was planned for, right? So like, no, we must buy more platinum, right? How are we going to fund that exercise? The quickest way is to delay payment on things that you typically would have paid for, you see, to finance that. So that's where accruals typically would, but I don't think people intentionally say we're always going to be using accruals to finance these things because I think you will create bad relationships with your landlord, with your landline supplier on your telephone. It is, I mean, you don't want also utilities. We're basically talking about water and electricity. When they switch off that thing, you pay penalties to get them to come back and switch back your water or your electricity. So I look at all those things we listed as accruals because again we said natural operations in the business. I think you're just going to create bad relationships, you know. So it's really not worth it in the if you're using that consistently as a means of financing. Why do we also like to use that, or why is it something that we do actually acknowledge as short-term financing? It's usually interest free. So you can see it's actually cheap, you see. So yeah, but practically speaking, I don't think that that's something a business wants to continue to use. Yeah. Unless it's a fly by night, like you're not going to be an operator. Let's say you're running a tender, for instance. You know that 6 months from now, we're not going to be in business. Even a year from now, we're not going to be in business. So it's fine. We can destroy all these relationships. Yeah. But yeah.
Sometimes what accountants can do,
Yeah.
just they see that your business is making a huge profit, and as a result of the high tax,
Yes.
so just have to payment to a salary,
Yes.
maybe increase your expenses by maybe $1 million per month,
Yeah.
create an accrual of a salary.
Yeah. That hasn't been paid.
Expenses.
Yeah, yeah.
It's acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just- yeah.
You see, it really is a way to play around. But now I'm scared. What if the guys come check
Who's the guys?
SARS in future to say, was this actually paid? Because now how do you get that approval off? And I'm asking you because I know you in the practical space.
When they see you paying taxes, they don't like if they see that your company's paying tax.
Yeah.
It's high. They're not going to consider you. The
Okay.
problem is when you go up once and never pay tax.
Ah.
Something.
Okay.
So they just upside guys who don't pay at all.
Uh-huh. And then they start to investigate you and
Yeah.
stuff. Okay. Okay. Well, that makes sense. So here's our last slide. And here we're talking to, did I talk to factoring? So factoring is now, I am literally selling my debtors book to you. And so you are not going, let's say my debtors book is worth 5 million. You're not going to buy it for 5 million. You might buy it for 4.5, you might buy it for 4 million, whatever we agree and negotiate. Okay, because you now have the task of administering, calling, monitoring the credit with those customers. And on top of that, the reason why am I selling my debtors in the first place? Because I'm trying to generate some form of financing. So I need the money urgently. Does that make sense? For whatever reasons. Okay. So obviously you on the other side of that transaction are taking advantage of the fact that you need money, I have money. So let's strike a deal that makes it worthwhile for me also. Okay. So I'm not gonna pay 5 million for this, but I'm willing to pay 4.2, for example. So that's factoring. You are literally, it's not as collateral, your debtors are not as collateral, you are literally handing them over. You could say selling them at a discount. Sometimes we call this discount financing. Okay. Last one is then inventory financing, and this one is one that is not that common. Okay. It says here, this involves a company using inventories, your finished goods, usually, as collateral to obtain a short-term loan. Okay. I think people who would literally actually finance you are probably people who are in a similar space, right? Because I mean, yeah, I mean, if I can't sell the inventory that you are selling to me, then it doesn't really make sense. How are we going to convert this into cash? Right? So yeah, if you fail to pay, because remember that's as collateral. I'm giving you cash and then your inventory is collateral. Then inventory financing is more expensive than a bank loan, okay? Which makes sense because you are giving me now the responsibility of selling these goods if you default, okay? And then it is used to supplement a company's working capital financing needs. Financing needs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the theory side to your learning unit 5. Learning unit 5. Yes.
I don't know the title of it learning four was, but we were dealing, learning one was, I can't remember, but we were dealing with like long-term financing, like.
Yes.
All of that. This is like short-term finance.
I think it was capital raising,
Yes.
something like that. Yeah. Or capital structure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So this is just concerned with the short term.
This is definitely concerned with the short term. Yeah. Learning unit 1 was concerned with long term because we're also looking at, remember, when we are looking at our capital structure, we are only looking at long term. We're not worried about how do we fund our operations short term. 100%. Cool. All right. So I think we can take a break now. And then when we get back, I want us to just do exercise